Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Excellent.
Are you ready for a conversation about community? Okay. All right. This is not an AI. This is not an AI that we know of. Jesse, how you doing?
Very good. Good to see you.
You ready to have a conversation?
Sure am. You guys ready to listen and participate? Okay.
We'll make it interactive somewhat. I think that's the idea, right?
Yeah. So I have two teenage daughters, and we're very much in a bribe economy at my house. So I brought some books that I'm really passionate about called The Go Giver, which we'll talk about a little bit in relation to Startup Experts, the community that I run. But those people that ask questions will get a book. Okay. So we have up to 10.
So you've got two teenage daughters. I've got two kids in the audience who cannot ask questions or get a book. So I'll let you be the one that decides on how you distribute the books because they're going to just ask me 1,000 questions.
Yeah, well, both of my daughters have read this book, and at times that have been challenging, they've referenced it. So take it home, read it, pass it to your kids. It's a great read for them as well.
All right. So the conversation is really about community and also in the time that we currently live in and the time that we're moving in. I think Jesse and I, we were connecting on many different levels, but mainly around the importance of community and what that means. So I'm going to let you take it away and drive, and we'll just have a conversation, keep it interactive, and make sure that we try and deliver some value for everybody in the audience today.
Yeah, sure. First, I'll add some context. So I'm Jesse Freese. I've been in and around the HR space for 25 years. I started my career coincidentally in Washington, D.C., working for USAID, which unfortunately has been in the news and being shut down. I led recruiting there for a number of years. And then, I've worked in the Bay Area for 15, 16 years. My day job when I'm wearing my daytime hat is with Sequoia Consulting Group, employee benefits and payroll and comp and benefits advisor. Um, I joined Sequoia about 9.5 years ago, and about 8 years in, I was hosting a lot of events, and I realized that a lot of the same people were coming to these events, but really wanted to communicate with each other. They were asking after meetups, can I chat with so and so? Can you introduce me to this person? Or I had this pressing question and I didn't get to ask it during the session. And so enough of us, sort of same group of people, were sitting at that proverbial breakfast table saying, hey, why don't we create an online space? Like there's technology that can solve this. And that really was the first gen of Startup Experts. We'll talk a little bit more about how that's evolved and how we've come into what I believe to be a really strong community. But I don't know, Marcus, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for everybody for taking the time. I know that there's a lot of opportunity to spend your time elsewhere, whether that's in person or on phone. I've been in the HR tech and recruiting space the last 18 years. I was at a company called careerbuilder.com where I was really trying to convince people not to advertise in newspapers anymore because of this thing called the internet. And then moving forward, I built a couple of businesses. One of the businesses was actually a community-based business. I had a travel concierge business called Truly Vegas, where we were taking people to Las Vegas. That was an interesting time, which is maybe not for right now. And that was from the UK. Prior to that, I used to play competitive football, soccer, and then I evolved from just being, I suppose, in the community space, which is where I actually start into. I was a global president of a company called Adecco Group, leading digital transformation and innovation. So I was buying, building, and investing in HR tech companies at scale. And last 7 years, I moved to the US and I was operating a couple of the businesses that we were involved in. And then I decided to start my own company. And the company that I started was called EQ Community. And the main reason for the EQ is I believe that emotional intelligence is the most important human skill. And community is something that I really believe in. But I needed to make some money. So the way to make money was really by helping people in our community get access to what I knew, which were jobs and opportunities. So we built the community based on that. But in the background, because of my technology background, it was about how can you do this more effectively by leveraging AI at the time. And that was 3 years ago. So we started to build our AI products, help with the process of end-to-end recruiting. And we're 4 years in, and then more recently, we've been building AI agents for the staffing and recruiting space. But actually, what we're doing with the mission of Zero Admin is allowing people to get connected more effectively. whether that's at a dinner, whether that's for a webinar, whether that's for business development purposes. So the mission is zero admin, and we want to remove all the administration to help people get connected. So kind of the two things I love, helping people have access to opportunities and leveraging technology in order to do that.
The community business is all about information, right? It is bringing people together to share information. I wanted to just share and do maybe a little level setting for everybody. 2003 was a very pivotal moment for mankind. Anyone have any guesses on what happened in 2003? What's that? I don't know about that. That was on my 2003. Yeah. You're on you're on track. So very interesting. If you take a look at data and data collection from the beginning of mankind to 2003, in the next year, data doubled. The collection of data. Sit on that for a moment, right? Entire mankind to 2003. So what happened in 2003? Well, in part, MySpace got created, LinkedIn got created, WordPress got created. Bandwidth in the United States moved from 10 to 20%. You had the first iPod getting created. You had all of this technology. Digital cameras came into play. So suddenly you were collecting a lot of data. Fast forward to today. Today, the amount of data that we have, it's going to take 2 or 3 years before we completely double the amount of data we have here. So if you think about that, that's a massive amount of data that is coming at us, and we have to filter that. Techno stress, right? I have notes here because I always lose track of this. So there are 5 techno stressors, which I think is interesting to think about as I was doing some thinking about this. There is overload, which is just all the data coming at us, like being able to manage it. There is invasion, which is this always on. This is the alert that's getting sent off, the email that's chiming, just coming at you at all times. There's complexity. This is too many tools. This is just not knowing where to go. This is where AI comes in, right? Like what learning model should we use? There's insecurity. This is also AI. Am I going to lose my job? Am I not ready for this? Can I not flex to where I need to go? And then the uncertainty, which is just the changing conditions. A lot of techno uncertainty. I think community will help solve a lot of this.
So I have a similar framework, but more related to how we think about all of the, let's say, noise before we get to the signal. And one part of that is, and you mentioned in 2003, it was about data, big data. Everyone remembers that big data cry, like big data. Everyone was talking about that. And then it evolved from data to information. And you had the advent of new technologies that started to bring that data into a structured way. After that, what you're looking for is insights. So out of that information, what insights provide you with signal? And then once you have that signal, you can then get knowledge. And then the knowledge leads to wisdom. But there's a lot of connective tissue between all of that to get to that point. And if you think of maybe elders or people that you would get information from that you would consider to be wise, they would tell you something that was super important where you could cut through all of the noise and give you a one liner. Right now, to Jesse's point, there's a lot of data overload. And part of the challenge is finding that collective community of people that you can connect with and have a real level setting conversation and get through all the noise all the way through to the signal. So just a framework that I really think about, which is data, information, insights, knowledge, and then wisdom. And then how do you get to that by leveraging your community?
Yeah. Very well said. It's often so. Startup Experts has 2,200 members globally. HR, finance, ops, talent, really active community. We're averaging over 10,000 Slack posts a month. So a lot of conversation is happening. Uh, a common refrain that we've always heard is HR is pretty lonely. We hear that a lot from the HR folks. And this was pre-pandemic. Keep in mind that our group was 100% in person prior to the pandemic. If your story was similar to a lot of ours, we got sent home almost overnight. We're trying to manage our own personal lives, trying to do our jobs, trying to manage our kids, self care. A lot of things were bubbling up. But I would almost argue that moment in time when folks started to go online, they started to be comfortable with Zoom and Slack. They actually became more connected. They actually had a quicker access to information and relationships than they did before the pandemic. So I find it really interesting that I think as we graduate in a post-pandemic world, we yes, there's a lot of data being thrown at us, but that connectivity, that relationship, that human touch actually has been improved.
It's interesting. So when we started EQ Community, we started it in and around the pandemic, and people were really wanting to connect with other people because they weren't able to obviously go out of their houses and do things of that nature. What I learned from building that community was that you really started to get the depth of a relationship if somebody had met somebody else in person, either first or after, and then continued the discussion online. So one of the things that I think about a lot is the depth of relationship because there's so many connections that you have, and I'm not sure what the number is. I think it's like 160 that you're able to compute and remember as an individual in terms of having strong relationships. And we kind of go around and we have all these connections and all these people. But what about the depth of that connection and relationship? I'm not sure if that's something that you think about as well, Jesse. But I know within your community it's very tight knit. From looking at some of the stuff that you're doing online and the gatherings that you have at Transform and all these different places. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you think about the depth of connections.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I'm glad you brought up Dunbar number. Robin Dunbar. He's a evolutionary biologist, psychologist, sociologist. Look him up if you have not, and be familiar. In 1990, he released this really pivotal study on social circles and how well people could stay connected. And if you go back in time, whether it's foreign legions and Eskimo tribes, it was an ability to stay socially connected to about 100, 150, 160 people. Fascinating because in our world, like we have tools and crutches to stay in touch with that high school friend via Facebook and know that they have kids or know that their parents have passed away. Like we have the ability to scale. But to your point, Marcus, that true connection really only exists to that small circle of people. And I really feel strongly, and we talk about this later, that the true metric of a strong community isn't number of metrics, and not the number of members. It's the level of engagement of those members.
Question. So, how many of you in here raise your hand if you consider that you're in a community? Okay, great. Keep your hand up if the community is over 100,000. All right. So we've got one person with a community over 100,000. That's a big community. Love to learn more about that. How many of you, and you can shout numbers out because I want to make this interactive. Like, what number do you consider to be the optimal number for a community that you like to be part of? Is it 10, 50, 100? Like, what are the numbers that make it feel like a community to you? 500? Okay. 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 Yeah. So, and we were talking a lot about this. The format of a community is also important, and um, I must have read this somewhere, but there's or observed it as well as a combination. But there's different formats of community, and you can have like a stadium, let's say, community where maybe you have people on stage, and they are then bringing a community together. You can have the format of let's say a nightclub community where those people together are collectively having those conversations, which we might call peer to peer. And then you have more of the intimate communities, and that might be a dinner or an event where you've got 12, 15 people that are close to you. And I think just having an awareness of the type of community that you're in and maybe how you need to show up or how you want other people to show up in there is quite important because we played around with a load of different formats and some of them didn't work. And the reason that they didn't work is there was an expectation that was different from each person coming into the community. So as you're trying to embark on maybe finding new communities or finding new tribes, thinking through that format is also something that I've started to spend a lot more time on and wasn't thinking about a lot when we first started ours.
I'm going to push on that. Based on what you did learn, if somebody out here is looking for a community and that is the right fit for them, what would you recommend they look at?
I don't think you look at anything. I think you think about the purpose. I think it's always goes back to like what are you trying to achieve, and whether we're building software, you're looking at a community. It's always like, what's your North Star? My North Star is to unlock access to opportunity through innovation, inspiration, and inclusion. So anything that I do guides me through that. Our business's mission is zero admin. So if you have those two core principles, and maybe you want to figure out what your North Star is, then you can find the communities and the tribes that will connect to you. And then you'll decide, does that format make sense for you? Because you might have to go into an environment that's uncomfortable for you. And if you go into an environment that's uncomfortable, but you know it's going to be good for the North Star, then you'll still continue to do it. So for me, it always starts with purpose.
No, that's really well said. So, we've learned a lot. So Startup Experts, we have an all volunteer leadership team. It's a free to join community. Um, we are only here because there are individuals that have volunteered time. And I would actually argue quite strongly that we have gotten further down the road because of that. Individuals that are between roles that are really passionate about hosting events, that want to share knowledge, they'll come in and lean in. We're based on the go giver, which is, giving without any expectation of return, although I've not yet heard a question. So I am expecting a return for the book, which would be a question.
There's been some answers.
Answers. But I think what's really interesting about it is, we are all about engagement. So it really is individuals come to this group because they want to get involved. They want to learn. They want to be around, like-minded people. And I think we'll talk more about this in a little later. But all of these tools, all of this data coming at us, great. And I actually truly believe that AI is really breaking the community business because typically an individual would go to a community because they wanted information and it was somewhat siloed. Now, I imagine all of you can do a quick query and all of this incredible data comes back. But do you know it's real? Do you know it's authentic? Where a community excels is it has that filter. It has that human component. There's that compassion.
I, I would, yeah, go ahead.
I can't stop looking at collective intelligence on your slides, and I think that the thing really interesting.
Nope.
On like people coming to community to get information, feel authentic. But where do communities then like build into the like how do that? Like they were like pathway, like you said,
Yeah, I think Marcus hit on one point that I always come back to, and that is when we talk about events within our group, we really talk about small curated events. And so when we onboard, and we're very intentional with our onboarding, we meet every new member that joins our group and we do a lot of events. We're averaging 8 to 12 events a month. Amazing. But when we're doing online events in particular, our goal is actually for it to be a small 8, 10 person meetup, not we're going to fit 100 people on this Zoom call and everybody's going to show up Zoom link off. The reason, because we center on at our group is one part social, building enduring relationships, having that trust, know who you should reach out to when you have that question, but it's also learning and development. And so if we can have 8 to 10 people sharing knowledge and have that context and know that this is a really deep bench of experience, I think you've achieved that.
Just to add to that. No. Don't be sorry, Alexander. You're going to ask a question in a second. Feel free to ask now if you want, and then I can go second. I've got a question. So that conversation, and maybe it's an assumption / question, but was that online, or was that in person? But the yeah, okay. And prior to having that online conversation, what context was provided? Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I do outside building communities, I build AI agents. and I have a framework for the AI agents, which I call OTT, which is objective, tasks, and tools. But then you also need the context. And the AI agents, I look at some, this is not always, they're not humans, right? But in some ways, it's like, what context do you provide that AI agent with in order to complete that task or that objective? Yeah. And then it goes down to if we think of news feed, and I've got all these analogies, but feed, right? How is that consumed? So with your text or whatever you had sent to that person, how many calories were in there? And how much meat and potatoes was in it? Because some people digest information in different ways. And so it's not necessarily whether they have the cognitive load or not. It may be the way that they digest that information and also what other dynamics they have at play. Maybe they're managing 5, 6, 7, 8 other conversations or 160 other people. So I found in order to connect with people, you always got to meet where they are. How do they want to consume? And once you understand how people consume information, you can provide them with the right information at the right point in time. So it's not always about getting a message across, but maybe how they want to consume. Jen, you got a question?
I'm still thinking.
So I think that there's many ways to think about a community, but I'll lend two observations. One is that you think of a community as a siloed environment. And then the other is that you think of it as an organism of part of a larger ecosystem. And then you have connective tissue between those points of a larger ecosystem. So the question is how are you then bringing information back in versus being in silence? So this room right now, we're not getting any context around what's going on in the other sessions. But when we leave this room, if we watch the videos, we'll have some context around it so we get a full picture. And I say that you have to collect the dots in order to connect the dots. So if you're constantly thinking outside, and it goes back to like the chat GPT thing or whether it's Gemini, whatever it is, are you and I can mention this, are you critically thinking through the information that you're receiving? And as you're receiving that information, are you then continuously questioning it and pushing it to the boundaries and don't necessarily take that information for verbatim in that context at that point in time? Because information changes as it travels. And the value of the information evolves as time travels as well. And so I think points of time, I don't think we think about that enough, right? Like we're here right now at this particular point in time, in this moment, and what I'm saying may or may not be valuable today, right this second, but it could be more valuable in the future or less valuable. So I think it's really about understanding the environment, and we spend less time thinking about the environment and how you can have people from outside of the environment, whether it's people or information sources, that can connect into that to give you a full picture. It's like a knowledge, I see it as a knowledge graph, almost like a social graph. And then there are nodes within that that you then need to think about and have a collective view. It's hard to visualize, but I think it can be done.
It's a great observation and one that we've had internal conversations within our group and on our leadership team. You know, point being that we are 100% referral. You know, so members introduce other members to our group. We do no marketing. You know, outside of maybe showing up for this or maybe appreciating a partner at an event. You know, we stay very quiet, and that's purposely done so that we have a curated group of members that want to be there, that want to engage, that have a similar, professional view. But yeah, I mean, it leads to bias. We have talked about how can we share our knowledge outside. The perspectives of our group is really amazing. I share sometimes that when we came up with the name Startup Experts, we realized that we were not experts, right? And some people feel very uncomfortable joining our group, and there's imposter syndrome, and we get this question often. And what we say is, we're at the size now where you can always find somebody in the group that likely is an expert in that, or hopefully a couple people. And so collectively, we are startup experts. But I think you're right. I mean, it is a filtered view of how we look at the world. We have thought about bringing in purposefully folks out of different constituencies, different groups, but we haven't executed well on that.
There's a couple of things that I found when we were running our community that really worked, which I was just unaware of. And they're pretty simple, but one is having a collective goal. So if you're working on a specific project for a period of time and you say, hey, like we're all going to get together and do this thing, and that that was really what had driven me to this talk as well, which is around collective intelligence. It was a guy that was working with us. He was a large tech firm, and he had said, like, what can we do in this community that you can't do as an individual? And I think that's one of the big powers. And then once you do that, you go through something and you'll learn, you'll connect, you'll figure out who maybe you want to connect with on another project. But building a project together is really important. Also, the topic as well. It's hard to say, hey, let's just get in this room and let's all be friends. Versus what we had, we actually had, how do you get on boards? People wanted to learn about that, and then there was, and to Jen's point, which is a really good point, is around, we had, our community was on what we call 4 C's, which is careers, connections, conversation, which led to capital. But we wouldn't just have quote unquote candidates on there. We would have candidates and executives, and then we'd cross pollinate. So you'd have people that actually have done the thing, whatever you're trying to do, and maybe they want to lend that message and their mentors inside of that community, but they're not like there as mentors. And then you have people that want to learn. And the real magic of it is that you have reverse mentorship. So we used to do this program at Adecco called CEO of 1 month. And that person that had won the CEO program got to travel around with the CEO across the entire country. And then there was a global one and so on and so forth. The group CEO learned more from the individuals, he said, than they did from him, because it was a reverse mentoring. So reverse mentoring is also really powerful if you're looking to connect with people that maybe have some expertise that you don't. So those are some of the things that I've noticed and we've seen. I can say one thing to that, because I working for a global company. We had English, and then we had business English, and within that we had clear definitions. And so in order for you to agree upon something, you need to have definitions that you agree upon. So the language may sound the same, but the definitions sometimes go amiss, right? But and then how you communicate with that language as you connect multiple words together. What you think you mean versus what I'm receiving may be slightly different. So there's a translation piece, and Google actually just came out with something recently, which is like well, they've had it for a long time, but you can translate with AI in real time into different languages. Now it's a slightly different scenario, but it all comes down to interpretation. And so even as, and I keep going back to AI, but as we build these agents, we have interpretation agents in between to understand what the user wants, to understand the query. And I think a lot of the things that it seems like you're talking about is understanding. How do people digest that information? Yeah, you get you connect to the external environment as well and bring that data in at the same time. So yes, you can do that, but it depends on how, like, where that information is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that, and then we'll go up there. See ya. I'll add that it took us many years for us to arrive at a community guidelines, which slightly different, but getting everybody to row in the same direction and make sure that we know how to show up for each other. And in part, as it relates to the question about, how do you build true relationships? For us, it's showing up for one another. It's based on this book, Go Giver, which is, giving without any expectation of return. Is this the right place for you? And if so, how are you contributing to the value? Are you improving this group? For us, that is either coming out to an event like this, right? It's getting out from behind your desk and coming and making the effort to come meet people and build relationships. Or in cases in which we don't have that, we have private leader circles that meet for 8 to 12 weeks, and they have to show up with their group of people once a week and talk through in a private setting. So that's how we get people to really find that mold. Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And honestly, I think this is where our group is probably the most proud, frankly, is the on-ramp for new members. Um, when we were looking at how do we create a group where people want to be here, they know how to get engaged, it truly was, how do we get them brought into this organism? Fortunately, we have a lot of really smart HR leaders that run onboarding programs at their own companies, right? We could tap into this incredible group of knowledge. And so for us, we have an application process. We require all new members to attend a 30-minute virtual new member orientation. all members. And frankly, it is an incredibly effective wall for activity wall for determining whether a member is the type of person that's going to show up and want to get involved with other folks. We're free to join, but we lose over 50% of the applicants from application to showing up for the new member orientation. Surprising, right? And then we actually just recently started to tighten it even further. We've created a 90-day on ramp. So what before was, yay, you've attended the orientation. Here is access to the Slack workspace. Here is how you can attend events. Here are people that you should get to know. There's a lot of infrastructure to help support connections. Now they actually have to go even further, and there's a 90-day. You have to do X, Y, and Z. You have to attend a Go Giver book review, leader meetup, and it's all about just warming up those muscles so that by the time they become a full member, they have that social connection in the group. I don't know. How do you?
I think with the onboarding in particular, it's super important to understand why people come to the community. So that was one of the big questions that we asked. And then you also want to understand the level of experience that they have in whatever domain that is. So whether that is beginner, intermediary, or advanced, and then you would connect them with the right people. So I think that, again, it's if you've got a specific topic and somebody's behind on that topic, that can be frustrating, but it doesn't mean that that person can't add value in another way. So I think that the reverse mentoring is a very key aspect in terms of the framing, because you might bring somebody into community and they're in a large group and they want to learn, but also to Jesse's point, if you're giving more than you take, if you go in with a community in a mindset, I'm going to give, and if I get something that is valuable, great, but that's not my mindset. I think really trying to scout people around that, because some people just want to be a part of a community to give the information that they have, and then they'll receive something later. So there's a kind of karma to it as well, and a structure in terms of how you frame those onboarding questions.
Yeah, I'll finish that up and then we can take another question. This has been a journey of learning on community building. I never got into this to think that, I'd be helping form this and a lot of mistakes along the way. I think what we're really looking at now, and we have a couple of volunteers thinking about this is, if you look at the numbers, we'll be in 2.5 years around 5,000 members, which is astonishing, right? Because we're very much on this up and to the right. Uh, but that 5,000 members from a social context, from a community, is very different than where we are now, and very different than where we were, even a year and a half ago. So how do you keep people wanting to be in this group where everybody, kind of going back to that Dunbar social context? I don't have the answer for this. We're thinking about, is this a geo thing? Is this a functional thing? Is this what level are they in a role? But we are starting to break our group purposely into constituencies to try to be real value driven at what that group wants.
Similar topic, but again, I think format is really important. And when we had started our initial community, we got it to 1,500 people, so less than that. But and that format was, you'd have a person and then people then connecting around those people, and it was really around the topic of inclusion. More recently, we've been building quote unquote community, which is more of a one to many, and that one to many has 45,000 people. And then those people feel like they're part of something, and then they want to then have their own discussions directly. So the format is super important. And again, like, if let's take any famous star, let's take Taylor Swift, for instance. The Swifties, I think, are going to feel like they're part of a community. But without Taylor Swift, there's no real community. So what type of community did you sign up for? Did you sign up for one that's collective between a group of other people, or did you sign up for a community where there's a figurehead there, and they're the one that's leading and driving that? So I think just kind of having an eye on that is quite important. I think there's a question there as well. Yeah, I think it goes back to the amount of data that is being consumed. And even if you think about the terminologies that we're using for humans to consume this data, it was given to you in a format of a feed. So there was a news feed, and you're being fed data, fed information that you didn't necessarily want to consume. And it's set up for consumers. So I went on an information diet a couple of years ago, before I set up EQ. and I looked at all the calories that I was receiving and decided very specifically that I'm only going to consume these certain calories at this point in time because they're going to help me learn. So I think that there's a lot of learning that needs to happen and conversation that needs to happen around the information that one is consuming. As far as cognitive offloading, it's like how much can you handle, right? Because also the types of information, again, I go back to format, whether it is visual, it is audio, it is written, it is text. I don't know how many of you after COVID went into a physical environment and it felt a little bit weird after a conference. Remember that? Different now, right? Like, and then how many of you are now scrolling and it's like you feel tired after you scrolled, like physically exhausted. We need to have an awareness of like what the technology is doing to us. Again, I go back to Google, which I think is an interesting example because the idea initially was you would search for what you were looking for. That was the red encyclopedias, the Britannia. Like you'd have to go and look through those and scroll and see the information that you wanted to seek. Now it's being fed to you. And I think that there just has to be a big level of awareness in order to offload that cognitive kind of load that you receive because you're not entirely sure why you're being fed it, ads, all this type of stuff. So that would be my perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty personal conversation for me as well, because about 12 years ago, I was running really, really hard and I felt like crap for about a half a year. And I got to see every doctor under the sun trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Ultimately, it was this. It was just too much stuff was coming at me. And, some acupuncturist, well, it's not a medical diagnosis, but is adrenal overload syndrome, which is just, your body is just taking in so much that you're getting the shakes. And so, about once a year, I start to bump up against that edge and I know I need to back off. And so cognitive offloading for me is that backing off is like, what am I going to do with all this excess data? There's a lot of tools out there that we can harness, the Notions, the Obsidians, and all these places we can dump data. I think fundamentally community is different than, or will be different in the future, is certainly now is different than it was 10 years ago. And certainly, if you go back hundreds of years, I mean, community is not new, right? We've had, a lot of social organizations that have collectively pooled information, and then you can tap into this knowledge set. What is different is that social context is being able to offload, having a system for offloading all of this information so that you can quickly retrieve it. That's why I think AI and all these tools are absolutely amazing, right? Like you can quickly jump walls and be able to retrieve a bunch of data. What you don't know, or at least what you don't know with certainty, is how accurate that data is. That's where a group of people that you trust, that's where it's important to actually have individuals that you're spending time with and have that social context.
Go ahead. Why does everything have to be scalable? Why does everything have to be scalable?
Yeah.
No, it's just a question.
Yeah. Well, the point was, yeah, I mean, the point is, that interconnectivity between two humans. I think, Marcus, you were talking about last week about, being at a bus stop and everybody was on their phone.
I literally took a picture of it again this morning.
You
'cause
know,
I went past the same bus stop.
yeah, and another statistic is 60% of web traffic right now is mobile. 60%. So that's all these people sitting at a bus stop, not talking to anybody. And I think you made the point that you should put the phone in your pocket and talk to somebody.
Well, apparently if you're on your mobile, you're on the way somewhere. Apparently. So along that journey, I think that we need, again, it's about reflection. The one thing we haven't talked about today, which I think is really important, is energy. And I'll ask a question for the audience again. How many people have ever been on a call with someone and they've left the call and they felt drained? Yeah. Don't have calls with those people. Don't have calls with those people in the afternoon. Okay. You might want to have them in the morning. How many people have left a call and you've just felt completely energized? All right. Find more of those people? Because what we're talking about is energy. And we're talking about the like energy is neither created nor destroyed, it's merely transferred. It's thermodynamics, right? So how are we able to transfer energy between one another and have good energy at a time when we need it? And I think that's the other thing. Like it's okay for it to be one to one and for it to not to be scalable, and you get that connection. Like that's fine. And I think the format again is important, whether it's one to one, whether it's 10, whether it's 100,000, but knowing why you're going to that particular community or you're in that modality.
Just one quick one though. That's intriguing, like the energy, but is the energy the person to person, or is it the context of what you go? Like I could have a terrible conversation with my wife about where my son should go to school, but I'm not going to walk out of it and say,
Everyone's different, and that's what makes us unique. Some people get energy from being alone, introverts. Some people get energy from being in big groups. Some people are somewhere in the middle. So I think you got to find that out for yourself, and it goes back to the purpose. What are you trying to do?
Yeah, I think, you know, Marcus asked size of communities, right? There were small. I think I heard somebody say 10 and then 10,000, right? Like community is, it could be as small as two people if both two people want to be there and want to interact and want a better future, right? And I think that's really key. I think a lot of community builders build community and it comes from top down, and it's we're doing this for a particular reason that might not align with actually the people that are showing up. And so I think if you have folks that want to be there, really want to learn, invest in one another, then that is great.
So I remember when we had our community, there was somebody that was in the community, and our community was for diverse professionals from different backgrounds to help them connect. I didn't put a label on it, whether it was black, white, women. It was just people that wanted to connect. I remember somebody came into the community and they had a spouse that they had also invited in. And I had heard through the grapevine that this had turned into some kind of argument because the spouse was like, hey, like, what is this community for? Like, are we exclusive? Blah, blah, all this stuff. And it was really just a place for people to connect. So I'm just giving that as an example, right? I think it comes down to building bonds, and bonds are quite hard to form online. Is what even though I have it online, I'm in AI, and it's quite hard to form like a deep bond with somebody online. So you have to bring people into an environment where they have a collective view on the world. And to Jesse's point, he talked about a better future. If you can agree on one thing, then that the cultural norms, the North Star, then the cultural norms go away and the North Star drives everything. And so I think a lot about that. Like, how can you bring people together in an environment where they want to either achieve something, be something, or move something forward, and they're at the cost of potential cultural norms, right? And people have to be up for that, to take that sacrifice, because everybody comes from a different perspective. And the last thing I'd say, and that is, I think travel is a great way for you to kind of remove some of those barriers, seeing things from different perspectives. Some of the best people that I've ever worked with, they know one or two languages or three languages, and they are up for ingraining others' culture all the way to the end because they want to learn about it and they generally care about it. So
We don't encounter that too much. Certainly, there's a number of examples where we had to have sidebar conversations with particular individuals. We built a community guidelines that has served us really well. We built that about 2 years ago. Um, I'd say the demographic that we have the biggest headaches with are fractionals and consultants. That folks are coming into the group and a part of their job is to promote their brand. Now, it's a bit like the proverbial fox in the chicken coop because those individuals also have a lot of expertise to share, and if they are sharing, then they're lifting up everybody because we're able to learn from them. And we're fortunate that we have a searchable Slack workspace, so perpetuity of content, which can go both ways. If somebody says something impolite, it's there for a long time until one of us catches it, and then maybe we'll remove it. But also, if somebody is over the top, uh, that's there. And we generally don't want to police. We generally keep that stuff out there, and somebody from the leadership team might, provide a comment of context so that we can all learn from it. We have a no transaction policy on our platform. And so we want to continually to remind that. And so what ends up happening is you have a couple of real diehard people that will jump in and course correct, which I love to see.
it, and I think again it goes down to purpose, right? Like what's the purpose of the community, and then what's your purpose? Because we're actually building communities for transactions, which are referrals only, right?
So we're opposite.
Yeah, but we're building them for other people. So
Okay.
we build communities for other people, individuals, companies. We help them get their subscribers up, their webinars, and it's dependent on what the purpose is. So we've got somebody that has a fishing business, and she wants a community for people that are in the fishing industry internationally and globally. But she's doing recruiting in that space, and she wants to talk about the trends in the fishing industry. And then obviously outside of that, there are other types of communities where people want to just generate referrals.
Yep.
So if you understand the reason why you're in a community, it helps a lot. Really understanding what that purpose is. And I think that's one evolution we had where we created our own, but it's not for everybody. So what communities do you want to create, and how do we create that community for you that serves that purpose? And you can be in more than one community, but you might not want to be in, like, if you're in 1,000, again, depth, something to think about. So there's a balance between the two. So I'll give a perspective on that. I don't fully agree with those sentiments, and I'll tell you why. I'll give an example. So when our kids were born, we went to this NCT community. I don't know if you have that out here, but basically it's a community of people that are connecting before they have their children. And we're still in those communities. Right now, the hardship was having the kids, right? But that wasn't because the community had to go through a hardship together at that particular point. Is because of perspective. And so I think it goes back to like that commonality around like what is it that you're here for, and really that intentionality around that. Not that that can't be a reason, but I think what you've mentioned, what I found is that builds bonds. So when you go through a hardship with somebody, or a collective group of people, and you've come out of it and you turn around and they're still with you. You used to play professional sports, that builds a bond, which is slightly different to a community, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this, that we've been around for 8 years. Uh, Number of conversations we've had on our leadership team about, growing and long-term members and engagement. I liken it closely to a marriage, right? You have a honeymoon phase where everybody's excited. This is a really great place. You're meeting all these folks. You come out to your first event. It's really awesome. And then, you have to choose your own journey. Things you have to find new excitement. And so, an individual has to start trying out new things. We encourage people to build it, right? If there's something that's lacking here, we're buying for ourselves. Like, let's resource behind it and create it. But I could spend another hour. We could spend another hour talking about other communities and how they've evolved over time and created, investment arms and consulting arms and all this other areas where you're able to stretch as a member, and that wasn't the original entry point. That wasn't the reason somebody showed up. We're coming up on time.
Yeah, so we've got a minute left. We're over, so we gotta go.
Okay.
All right. Look, thank you for all of the questions, the conversation. I'll be here for the next hour or so. I think one of the things that I want to leave everyone is purpose. I think it's really important to define what your purpose is, and that will help you guide your community. If anybody wants help building a community, feel free to reach out. That's something that we do at EQ.
Yeah, I just want to leave with, as you walk out the door, who is your community? Who do you go ask when you have that hard question? And are you investing time and effort into building it? Because at the end of the day, all this great technology, all these tools, really amazing stuff, but it's really the people around you that give you meaning. So my encouragement is find your group and really invest in it.